Alright, I'm getting ready to do another wire job. Had a couple people say they couldn't see what I was doing. So I made this little thing so I got my phone hanging right over the top of it. I've already got everything prepped. Pickup leads are all prepped. Ground wire from the bridge. Ground wire from the bridge going to the output. I've made my main lead out from the volume to the output. It's real easy to do. I just put some heat tape on, or shrink tubing on there, and then twist it down, and then put another piece on the other end. Have everything pre-notched. If you see, I made my ground a little bit longer because the first place it goes to is the input, and then you got to reach around and hit the ground. So I just make it a little longer. I've got my jumper made and ready, already all cut, and my jumper ground. Got my output jack ready and the heat shrink tubing for my output jack, and I got my capacitor ready to go using a little old 2.2 MDF on it. Got all my tools laid out that I might need, and I use 60-40 solder. Make sure it's electrical. And let's see, looks like everything's hot and ready to go. So usually the first thing I do is I put my capacitor on my tone pot, and I use a little piece of tape just to hold it nice and steady. And like I said before, you really don't have to put the iron on anything per se. Just hold the iron right over the top of the peg and put your solder to it. And when it starts to flow, just let it kind of flow a second and pull it off. And check and make sure that the solder got all the way around it. If it didn't, just touch it. It'll flow. There you go, done. Let that set aside. And you come in, you can cut off your excess, get it out of the way. Then the next thing I usually do is I do my input. And on your volume pot, you know, I'm using a control plate, but if you're gonna put it to the box, I always just put them in cardboard, just like they're gonna lay, and have everything laid out the way it's gonna go. But it's easy to remember. You got input, output, ground. Just in, out, ground. You just work your way across. And if you're using a tone pot, I've seen people put the capacitor into the middle and then just run the jumper straight across. That's just a habit I've gotten into, but you just go from your input straight across to the middle with your jumper to pull the tone pot in. Alright, so what I'll do is I'll get my jumper and my input together. Pull them wires out of the way. Get them in there. And I always keep a piece of tape laying around because it's so much easier to holds everything in place for you while you get ready to do it. Then the same deal. Just hold your iron over the top of it. Let it flow. Touch it just a sec, just to make sure that it's getting everywhere. Boom. Done. Then I pull my jumper straight across, go right to the center. That's a little long. I like them kind of short. I don't like long. You don't need a lot of wire. The pegs aren't very thick, so. And usually that'll stay in place for you. Same deal. go. Yep, she's good. Let that set for just a sec. And then I just go ahead and push that down. It can be flat. It doesn't need to be up, and get it out of the way. Then I take my output that I've already prepared, making sure I've got my long end ground up on top. Like I said, you can do this all on a piece of cardboard too. You don't need, it's just the way I do things. That's a little long. I like them kind of short. I don't know if you can see that, but I like them kind of short. They don't have to be long. Sometimes this will stay here, and sometimes you might have to use your little tape. I think I'm going to use a little tape. Just there we go. That looks really good right there. Same deal, don't get crazy with the solder, don't get crazy with the heat. Doesn't take much. Okay, so we got our output in. Alright, so we've got that done so far. Now we can start with our grounds. Come here, little turkey. Stay right there. It's kind of long. Cut that off. There we go. And you bend that little eyelet in a little bit just to get it closer. And I don't get them too tight in there yet because you got to fish a lot of wires and a lot of leads through there. So we got our ground from our output coming in. We got our ground from our pickup coming in. And then I got my ground from my bridge. Wow, that one's really long. And I ground the bridge twice. I grounded it to the controls and then I ground it to the jack too. I just used a piece of speaker wire, and that way I have two grounds. I've had people ask me why, and I don't know, I just do that. I know you only need one ground wire, but I guess I just like to overkill it. And we gotta feed our jumper in here. Cut that off. Alright, so we got all of our grounds in there now. Pretty good menagerie of stuff. I'm going to put the tape out here just to hold that down. Okay. Now when you solder the back of pots, don't hold your iron on there because you'll ruin your pot. I've heard people sand the back of the pots. I've actually tried that, and for some reason to me the solder didn't seem like it wanted to flow on there right, so I just didn't do it anymore. So I guess that's just a preference of different people, so. But I don't sand them. But when you do these, hold your iron above your pot and get a good grip on your solder, because once that solder starts to flow, you're just going to melt that solder onto the iron and let it flow onto the pot without putting the iron directly on the pot yet. Just melt and blob a whole bunch of solder on there, and you'll see it'll start to flow. There it goes, see? Boom. And I didn't have to put my iron on the pot and heat the pot up too much. You don't want to do that. That's bad for the pots. Alright, got my little capacitor up there. Now we run our jump over. I'm just going to put that on there just to hold that down because that'll hold that. There we go. Same deal. Hold it up above your pot and just melt that solder onto it. There she goes. It should just flow right in there. You'll see when it starts to flow real good, you'll know. It just flows right on there. Okay, so we got everything done with that. So now we can jump down here and do our output. And I take the ground wire from the bridge and I just loop it together with the ground wire from the control plate. Twist those ends on there real good. And I put a piece of heat shrink tubing on here. You don't have to, but I do. Just to make sure nothing ever interferes with that. That heat shrink tubing is a little long, so I'm going to cut that off. There we go. There we go. That's better. And then we'll put that on the ground side. Usually what I do is I just kind of put it in there and then kind of lean the jack and it just kind of holds itself there. Same deal, you don't have to get crazy. Yep, she went all the way through, so we're good. Then I'll go in there and I'll cut off that excess wire that came through. Then I just pull my heat shrink tubing down over it. Hands don't want to work today. I'm having a kind of buzzing today. Oh, almost forgot my heat shrink tubing. That looks a little long, so I'll go ahead and cut that. There we go. There we go, same deal, just kind of lean your jack